Well, I can put it really short. What keeps us going every day is just mental illness. Our own mental, no, I'm just kidding. You got to be a little crazy. No, we really find it a privilege to do what we do every single day. And that, is the basis of what keeps us going. But I want to read a few lyrics to a song that we sing at church that really kind of wraps it all into a nice little package. But then I'll tell you a little bit more history about my parents, and I wish they could be here today, but they're trying to stay a little bit on the down low and waiting for their calls for shots and all that kind of fun stuff. My mom broke her heel, but yeah, it's been about almost 6 months, and she's just about going about that like this. So it's been a long process. I guess a good time to do it if you had to do it when you can't really travel or do much outside, but they're doing all right. So this song is called Reckless Love. If you want to ever listen to it, it's one of my favorite songs we sing. And the words go like this: before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. The overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. It chases me down. It fights till I'm found. It leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it. I don't deserve it. Still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. When I was your foe, your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. Then the bridge goes like this: there is no shadow you won't light up, no mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. And that is the basis of who we are and what we do. Because before I took my first breath, before I ever took my first step in life, Jesus did it all for me. And throughout my life and throughout my parents' life, he has climbed mountains, kicked down walls, protected us, and all that song says. And so it's the basis for us as Christians, as children of God, and for me, just as the human race together, that we're all in need of our loving God, one another. And if we have received that from, our Heavenly Father, can we then give that to those around us? Are we willing to be the wall, to protect somebody? Are we willing to tear down a wall for somebody, a barrier that's in place maybe for someone else that hasn't been there for us? And that's what we try to do every day at Harvest House. We have a lot of people who have experienced all sorts of stuff in their life that sometimes society looks at them to be different than you or me, but they're not. They have the same heart. They have the same creator. They have the same needs. And maybe oftentimes their needs weren't met as young children. Or even if they experience difficult things in life, like we did, many of us in this room experienced things in life, loss, maybe abuse, but maybe had a community around us to support us through those times. Give you a little brief history what motivates me personally to do what we do. As a child, I experienced sexual abuse for about 6 years, from age 6 to 12. And it was a friend of the family unfortunately. And when I was very young, we had a woman who was about 19 years old who was a close friend of the family. My parents and her parents were like best of friends. And she moved up here to Sarasota to live with us to go to school. And I was so excited because I was 5 at the time and I have 4 brothers. So I was like, you know, she's 18, 19 years old. She was cool. She played basketball. You know, she moved into my room because I was the only one with my only room, being I was the only girl. And like she was like my second mom. Well, she ends up getting married to a gentleman who wasn't such a great guy. Of course, after she got married, I started to spend the night with her because she was my big sister, basically. And that's when the abuse started in my life and ended up going for several years. When eventually I came out and told my parents when I was 17, and we did prosecute the gentleman, and he spent 6.5 years in prison. He got 15 years, but the way the laws worked at the time, he spent 6.5. What's interesting is I didn't know this because I don't remember a lot of that period of time in my life, but I had met with my big sister after I had told my parents, and you know, she was brokenhearted and devastated. She had 4 kids at the time also, by that time. And that's one of the main things that motivated me to tell my parents, because I thought our families were so close, and I thought this is going to completely rip our families apart. I'm probably never going to see her again, probably never have a relationship with her again. But they had 3 sons and a little girl who was 2. And I thought, I can't stay silent. What if this keeps her from being abused, the boys being abused, or other people like I was? So I told them, but when I met with her, she said, you know, Erin, one day when you were 12, she said, you came to me, because I would spend the night, you know, here and there on the weekends with them. She said, you got up on a Saturday morning, and I was about to take you home, and you said, I'm not going to spend the night anymore. And she said, I thought it was just, you know, a 12-year-old who was bothered by kids getting up at 6 a.m. on Saturday mornings. she's like, so I didn't make a big deal. I was like, okay, Erin, that's fine, you know, whatever, you can still come hang out, blah, blah, blah. And she goes, now I look back and I wonder if that was your way to be able to stop it in your life and not. I said, honestly, I don't remember any of that, but probably, you know, it's probably the only way a 12-year-old could figure out how to do that. So in time, you know, I tell you that story not for you to be sad for me or anything like that, because I've journeyed through, and I've had amazing support in my life. And that's what's made the difference, right? That's why I say a lot of people have experienced things in their life. There are a lot of people who experience abuse as a child, like I did, who didn't have the privileges that I've had to get me to where I am. I had a 2-parent home, very loving, stable, who could wrap around me in a time of crisis. I had parents who believed me when I told them that it happened, who said, hey, what do you want to do about this? We'll get you help. If you want to prosecute, we'll do that. But the stories that we hear from clients is, Mom didn't believe me that Dad was raping me. You know, or there was no stability. Mom or dad, oftentimes about 75% of the people we serve came from single parent homes, and about 75% of the families we serve are single parent homes. So the crisis is so big when something like that happens, oftentimes a parent doesn't know what to do. You know, they're financially stressed out, they've got kids, and so it never ends up really being resolved or dealt with, and the child is never given the opportunity to really heal. And from there, you know, of course it's proved to be quite substantial in my own life, and issues I've had to overcome and journey through, that without the support and the stability that I've had, a church family, my family, I wouldn't be here today. And so that saying, but for the grace of God, there go I, that to me is very real, because if it wasn't for the grace that was bestowed on me, why on me and not some other people that we serve, I don't know. I have a lot of questions for God when I get there. Like, you know, why did I have that support and that love through a really tough time in my life? but so many other people don't. And so that motivates me. I'm mad about that. I want people to have the support that they deserve. We're all human. We all deserve love. We all deserve peace. We all deserve joy, opportunities to succeed. And so that's what we want to do every single day. We want to wrap around all the people we serve, just like a family would. And I know we can't ever substitute the love of a mom and dad and siblings, but man, we're going to try. We're going to be there in every way possible and love them unconditionally and let them freak out when they need to freak out, let them fall apart when they need to fall apart, and be there to journey and pick up the pieces and continue to move on. So that's a little of my motivation, but it also tells you how incredible my parents are. Give you a little history. My dad grew up in Brooklyn, so he's an Italian New Yorker. My mom grew up outside of Baltimore in Catonsville. They came from very two different worlds. My mom, her parents were in their 40s when they had her, and she's the only child. My grandmother had several miscarriages, but God gave us my mom, thankfully. And so she grew up kind of your middle-class country club life, although she hated the country club because it was just golf and bridge, and she was a kid and she wanted to go play in the mud. And my dad grew up in a very rough part of Brooklyn, very poor. His dad left his mom when he was 12, started a new family, and so he grew up very much with his single mom, financially struggling. My grandmother struggled with loss of her husband and income and all that, started using alcohol and partying, which put my dad in very compromised situations when he was a young kid. So he experienced some abuse as a child. In time, they ended up both in a very small town in Pennsylvania. My dad got shipped up there to be with his dad because my grandmother couldn't handle him anymore. He was getting out of control as a teenager. And my mom had a friend she was going to college with whose uncle was the pastor of a church. And so she visited with a friend and ended up moving up there. Well, my mom and dad meet from very two different worlds and experiences. They date for a year. Then my mom's like, this guy's crazy. I don't want anything to do with him. And they break up. And then my dad would call where my mom lives. She rented a room up there in this little town. And he would call and say, is this Peggy Graham, the woman I'm going to marry? And my mom would say, Jimmy Minor, if you were the last man on earth, I wouldn't marry you. And this went on for about a year or so. And they ended up going to a revival meeting, not together, but they both went separately. And they saw each other in the lobby of the church. My dad, of course, sees Peggy Graham, and he's all excited. So he walks over there and goes to shake her hand and say hello. And my mom's like, oh, run, hide. Where am I going to go? And, my dad gets over there in time, shakes her hand. Hello, Peggy Graham. And my mom said in that moment, God spoke to her and said, that's the man you're going to marry. And she goes home and says, what? Wait a minute, I've already given you this chance. But she just opened her heart, and God started to they fell in love. She fell in love with him. God melted her heart for him and his heart for her. And they ended up getting married in 1976. 10 months later, they had their first child, and believe me, everybody was counting the months, just to make sure. But they had their first child and stayed up in Coudersford for a few years until they had their second child. And then they were called to Miami to be an associate pastor down there. So they spent a few years in Miami. And interesting enough, I was born up in Pennsylvania but never lived a day there. While my parents were in Miami, they were very, very poor. My mom never went to a doctor when she was pregnant with me, never had prenatal vitamins, just very poor. My dad worked several different jobs. Well, my mom had worked for a doctor up in Pennsylvania, and he said, hey, if you can get up here to have the baby, I'll write off my portion of delivering the baby, and we have a grant who can take care of the rest. So my mom got an $80 ticket at the time, flew up to Pennsylvania, had me, 12 days later flew back down to Miami. So when people ask me where I was born, I'm like, well, where I'm from, I'm like, well, I was born in Pennsylvania, but I was only there 12 days. So moved back to Miami, and then in 1984, after their fourth child, and they ended up having 5, after their fourth child, they moved to Sarasota because there was a small group of people, only about 5 to 10, who were looking for a lead pastor. My dad was traveling back and forth on the weekends to meet with them and see if they wanted him to be pastor. So in June of 1984, my parents moved to Sarasota to pastor just with a handful of people. And kind of that's where it all starts. When they got here, their heart had always been for the church to really exist outside of the 4 walls, to live everything that we preach. And they felt it was an opportunity to really dive into everything they believed. Now, truth be told, my dad knew what he was getting himself into. My mom did not. My dad had an idea of what he wanted the church to be like. My mom didn't know what he was thinking quite yet. My dad, because of his own upbringing, the brokenness that he experienced, the abuse and stuff like that, really saw the ministry going in that direction. My mom didn't want to be pastors at all. She didn't want to be a pastor's wife. She didn't want anything to do with it. She just wanted to raise her family and to leave me out of the rest of that craziness. Well, in time, of course, my dad started doing his thing at the church while my mom took care of 5 kids. And then my mom, throughout time, of course, was like, this is what we're all meant to do. This is a minor family DNA thing here. And it became, our entire family was just engrossed in everyday activities, from cleaning the toilets to picking green peppers from Hunsader Farms to give out at the food pantry, to, now 3 of us kids work full time as adults. So it's been a journey. My parents have a ton of stories of God's miraculous provision, from building materials just popping up when we need them, to God providing for them financially. My parents struggled for many, many years, trying to build a church and support 5 kids. But God always provided. There's a quick story I'll tell you. My parents wanted to place us in a private school, the Tabernacle, which doesn't exist anymore, the school part at least. And so, they were like, we don't have any money for private school, although it was probably the cheapest private school at the time. But they was like, we're going to do it. We believe this is a good opportunity. And they needed $300 to put my oldest brother Jim in school. And they're like, there's no way we're going to get that. But they just kept believing. They registered him anyway. And about 2 weeks later, a check shows up in their mailbox, and it's for $300. And there's a note with it that says, you all, supported us so-and-so long ago down in Miami, and we've come into some money, and we want to send you a check to say thank you. And it was the exact amount of what they needed for registration. And Mom was like, this is just a God thing. But time and time again, there are so many stories like that where God just stepped in every time and said, nope, I'm here. Nope, you're not doing this on your own. This is not your ministry. This is, we're in this together. And I've put it on your heart to do it, and I'm not going to let you walk alone during this. It's been 37 years now, and he never has. He's never not provided. He's never not come through. Now, sometimes we would rather him come through a little faster, a little earlier, less anxiety, but he has always come through. In 1990, when my parents, through the church, they decided to open the food pantry, and that was their first ministry into the community. Our church has always been made up of all sorts of people. I remember growing up and looking around and there were people in church, they were drunk, they were dressed not very appropriately, looked like they were partying out the night before, all different races, ages, and it was just a place where people knew they could come no matter what they looked like, how they were feeling that day. They just poured in, and it was at times a bit mayhem. But it was really God's house. You could see, his creation coming together no matter how good they felt about themselves or where they were in life. They felt comfortable coming, and that's always what my parents wanted to have. But through the food pantry, they realized a lot of people who were coming for food were homeless, had addiction issues, mental health issues, and so that's when my parents decided to take a mortgage out on their own home. And often they don't talk about this side because they feel like they're bragging on themselves or something. So that's why I'm here. I get to brag on them. Well, I want to make sure I didn't mess that up. They took a mortgage out on their own home and bought a little duplex to be able to open up Harvest House with 6 beds for men in recovery. And that's where Harvest House began. Now, over the course of time, they took out a mortgage on their house 3 different times to expand Harvest House. If I look back, I would tell them bad idea, bad business plan. Don't do that. But they had a ridiculous faith that, they didn't have a lot of income. They had 5 kids they were raising, kids getting ready to go to college, and they just believed so much in what we were doing, they were doing at the time. I was still pretty young, and they were willing to take that financial risk to continue to invest in people who oftentimes, didn't pay their rent, stole from us, did all sorts of crazy things that they were used to doing to survive. And Mom and Dad continued to pour into people. And I look now over the 37 years and the way that God has blessed Harvest House and everything that we do. And that is in part, to my parents' willingness to sacrifice for so many years and just plant seed. And now we just see the harvest of their lives every day. And it's as their daughter, I feel it a privilege to carry on their legacy and what they were willing to do with their lives, and hope that I can maybe just do a little bit of what they've done in their life, because it is to have the inside scoop, as your child and growing up and knowing what they dealt with and the stressors they dealt with, and not knowing how they're going to pay their own bills and the church bills and Harvest House bills week in and week out it's just been amazing. It has certainly taught me something about faith that I don't know if I would have really grasped anywhere else. So I know that gives you just a little history, a little bit more about my parents and where we are. Give you a little something about what's our most recent stuff, which of course has been the pandemic, which has of course affected all of us. We cannot say thank you enough to congregations such as yours and our community as a whole. You all got us through the pandemic financially. 33% of our income comes from program fees and rent. And so as our clients were laid off and they didn't have jobs, they were unable to pay their program fees and rent. And actually our expenses went up because now they needed help with food, they needed help with supplies for kids, they needed help, so until other resources were to come available, we had to step in and provide all sorts of things for our clients as our income went down. So we reached out to several people, and your congregation reached out to us. And without that support, it would have been scary. There were several sleepless nights I had during the pandemic, as I'm sure many people had, but I'm sure I would have many, many more. But we have financially been able to weather the storm of the last year Never closed any of our doors, never closed down one of our programs, and continued to serve. Our staff has just been amazing. You know, through a scary time where we all just wanted to go home and hide, we couldn't. We have 400 people who live on our campuses. And it's been a struggle and a challenge because, as you can imagine, shared living environments is not easy in the middle of a pandemic. When this first came out last February and we're trying to learn, okay, what does this look like? And the whole world's trying to figure it out. I was like, what does this look like in shared housing? Like, you know, my bachelor's degree is in psychology. Like, you know, so I'm like looking up pandemic plans and policies and procedures and what am I going to do here? What am I going to do there? What if this? What if that? Boy, I have had an education in creating our pandemic plan. I never thought we would have one of those plans and policies, but we do now. But our staff has just been tremendous. They just continue to show up every single day and love and serve, and we're able to do that because of supporters like you. I wanted to make sure that our staff didn't have to worry about their own income when every single day they were coming in, helping their clients worry about their income. And so we would not be able to continue to keep up all of our obligations to our employees and our staff without our community's support. So I'm so grateful for this community, and don't know if we would be where we are today without it. We have 400 beds. So I'll give you a little bit. We serve homeless families, veterans, unaccompanied at-risk youth, and men and women with a history of addiction. We also have affordable rentals. So those 400 bed encompasses all of those different programs.
Do you have children then too?
Oh yeah.
How do you handle the school situation with them?
It's a great question. So yeah, we serve about 230 children every year in supportive housing. And this last year, of course, has been quite the struggle because most of our parents are single parents. So it's not like one parent could stay home with the kids and one parent could go to work. It pretty much halted our single parents' lives completely. And that's where we had to jump in and provide, you know, food and provide supplies, make sure the kids had access to computers, because, you know, a lot of the kids don't have, you know, what they need. They don't have printers, they don't have the computers they need. Oftentimes they don't have good access to good Wi-Fi that's consistent and things like that for the Zoom calls and all that they had to do. So we just jumped in and to provide what the parents need, met with the parents, what do you need, you know, individually, each family, because everyone needed something different and it looked differently. We provided Uber cards, Lyft cards to get around town, because so many, if you imagine a single mom with a stroller, you know, one by the hand and one on the hip, trying to get on public transportation in the middle of a pandemic, it's not fun, you know, it's pretty scary. So we also offered them things like transportation cards to get around too more safely. But it's been a struggle for our parents, for sure, you know, quite scary. Many of them have just said, we don't know where we would be without an organization like Harvest House that we, you know, said, hey, don't pay rent until you can, you know, so we didn't charge them any type of rent, which is not a ton anyway, and then just went in and provided everything they needed. But we were able to do that because of, you know, our supporters. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I did, and I guess you had, while they were online, people to help the children with that too.
Yeah, so the different counties, you know, handled it differently, which made it complicated because we have people living in both counties. So some were hybrid, like you go to school some days and online other days. You know, some counties where it's either all in person, all online. But of course, when the pandemic hit in the spring semester for 2020, yes, everyone was home. So everything was online at the time, which, you know, not only was it difficult, of course, I mean, it's hard to keep kids' attention in school. You know, forget about through a 2D, you know, interaction where there's all the, you know, you think about, if I can imagine, I have 4 brothers. So growing up, there were 5 of us all on a laptop in the house trying to, forget it. It never would have happened. We've been throwing stuff at each other, you know, closing each other's laptops. You know, I mean, I can't imagine having multiple kids trying to do this at home, and so no doubt in the long term we're going to see kids who are behind educationally because it's so difficult. Also mental illness, of course, across the nation has increased. Suicide attempts has increased. There are kids who our children are reporting higher rates of depression, a lot of anxiety. And so that's kind of the next curveball that this pandemic is bringing us, that the long-term effects on the mental health and how do we help people through this now, because there's significant amount.
And one more question.
Yeah.
Are you eligible for the payroll protection plan? Or?
Yes, we did get some of the PPP money. Yes, we did. Yep. Yeah, thankfully. Yeah, we had so many different revenue things that got us through all of it. Yep. Yes, ma'am.
Specifically, outside of financial assistance, which
Mm-hmm.
we do provide, what could we do to help you?
Yep.
As far as a gift of time, those of us that are sitting here,
Yeah.
what could we do for you?
Thank you for asking that. So there's a couple different things. One, I know Frank always loves helps with our grow boxes, but it's a little more complicated right now because we're not having a ton of people on site, and we're not doing some of the activities we usually do for obvious reasons. But one is doing a supply drive, whether it's people within the congregation or maybe you have a bridge group or another friend group that you want to do a supply drive. We're constantly looking for single bed sheets and hygiene products and pillows and all those things because every time a client comes in, we give them everything they need, and linens stack up, towels and washcloths, and so if that's something you want to do a supply drive with friends, we always need that stuff. We do have we have Monday night classes with our parents, which have resumed, and we're spreading out and wearing masks and doing all those fun things. So if you have, a skill or an interest that you want to share that you think would benefit our clients, come and share that. We had a retired mechanic come a couple weeks ago, and he talked about the simple things to take care of a vehicle that a lot of our, you would think I would say my dad taught me, but actually my mom taught me. That my mom taught me that a lot of our people didn't grow up with a parent or an uncle or somebody teaching them kind of the simple things that you need to watch out for. So we had a mechanic come and talk about oil and talk about filters, and actually went out after kind of talking about things, just went out to the car and said, this is this part, this is that part, and the families loved it because a lot of them no one had ever taught them kind of the basics and not that you have to do it yourself, but what to look out for. Are you checking your air and your tires regularly? Because they don't have the vehicles that tell them automatically that the tire pressure is low. And so there's a skill that you want to share. We would love for our clients to hear that. It's also a great connection for those of you who've been involved. You get to connect with our clients, and they get to connect with other people, which we want that. We really want our clients to feel that sense of community and connections outside of just our staff. And so the more volunteers, the better.
Do you need more computers?
We need laptops, yes, desperately. We're constantly giving out, laptops. So if you got a laptop that's in good working order, it's got, Microsoft on it because they usually need Word and, all that kind of stuff on it. We definitely need that. We're giving out a lot to our youth population who are trying to get back into school, and we're trying to get them back into school. So we're giving them out regularly when we get them. Yes.
A few years ago, Presbyterian women from CSBT
Yeah.
Chapel contributed to a computer program. We provided the shipping costs, but you're not associated with that program anymore, or refurbished?
Right, we got a few of them, but then they just kind of stopped. So I don't know what happened if there was I don't know what happened with the other end, but we did probably get maybe 10 of them.
So if Presbyterian women wanted to use part of their budget for this year to provide what would we send, where would we send, what happens?
Yep. Well, there's a couple different things. The best way for us financially, because we have, because we're a nonprofit, we have connection with, I'm trying to think which, I don't do it, our IT guy does it, but we purchase them directly, so we get a good deal on laptops. And so if you want to earmark a certain amount of money for laptops, we'll do that. And then we can report back how many we bought and what we did with them. But that's probably the best way compared to you going to Best Buy and buying it full retail price. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
Do you still have more or less an outreach for foster kids who are turned out at age 18?
Yes.
Share that.
Yep. So our newest department is our Youth Services Department, which started back in 2017, where we work with youth ages 16 to 24. We have a couple different services for them. One, we have outreach services, which means we go into the community looking for them, connecting with other partners who may be serving this population. Two, we have a drop-in center where they can come. It's just for homeless and at-risk youth. It's the only one in town, Sarasota and Manatee counties for this population, where they can come in and we have a computer, if they don't have one, where they can fill out job applications, they can get something to eat, they can just relax and clear their head, do some artwork. We've got art supplies, charge their electronics, they can do their laundry, take a shower. So we have that, where they can meet with case managers, get therapy, all sorts of fun stuff. And then we have emergency shelter for this population, 18 to 24. Because the YMCA runs it for those who are under 18. And the reason we created emergency shelter beds for young men and women, although they're eligible and they can go to the Salvation Army shelter, a lot of the young adults end up being preyed upon in the adult shelters because adults have been on the streets for a long time, so their game is better than a 19-year-old's game. They understand the system of the street a little bit better. And they oftentimes be like, hey, if you do this, I'll protect you. And it ends up being a really sick cycle. So we wanted to pull out that population from the shelter if we could. So right now it's not as many as we'd like, but we do have 4 beds for young women and 4 beds for young men for emergency shelter. And then we help them with all sorts of stuff. Everything you can think of during that time. And then we have our New Heights program, which is our more long-term transitional living program, where our youth can be with us for a year to 2 years. And that's when they're really, our tagline for that is youth who aspire to go higher. So that's when they're really ready for more traction, working on goals, maybe go back to school, and then we can really work with them long-term. What's great about all of our youth services is it's free to all of our youth. The long-term living program is free, everything that goes with it is free. We do outings with them, to really give them a more broad perspective of what's available in life to them. A lot of them haven't had the culture experiences that we've had, and so they don't know you can be, the first chair of trombonist at the Sarasota Orchestra and make good money. They don't know those things. They don't know that, you can work up your way up through Publix, Fortune 100 company and make good money and have a good retirement. So there's a lot of things they just don't know that we really tried to kind of say, hey, did you know you could do this or you could do that? And you don't always have to do maybe what your parents and grandparents did. And they can end up saying, okay, I do have this skill and I would like to use it and I didn't know I could make money with it and now I can. So we really tried to do all sorts of things that bring them opportunities, light a fire in them, because when that happens, then there's not a lot of pushing that we have to do, right? They want to do it, and they're ready to go after it. So A lot of the kids, and what Linda mentioned, a lot of the kids do, at some point, they've spent time in the foster care system. And if you've been around social services at all or been interested in, you know that a lot of people who end up in prison, who end up in jail, have been in foster care. And foster care is unfortunately a common denominator in a lot of issues that people go through in life. So we get quite a few of the kids. Some of them aged out, some of them have spent different stints in foster care over their life, and so there's a lot of abandonment issues, trust issues with adults, as you can imagine. There's been a lot of abuse and trauma. And so not only are we working on your typical things like employment and housing and food and all that kind of stuff, but we're really working on a lot of breaking down all of those. They're hyper vigilant, and so trying to get them the therapy they need to start to break down, to allow their body to relax, to allow their mind to relax, so they can start to focus on things and not just purely safety or basic needs. And so that takes time. And that's a lot of what we do in the beginning is just, trying to break down those things so that we can have longer term success. So one of the things, it's been popular in the federal government is, hey, we want you to get someone housed in 90 days, and we've really rejected that idea because we're like, listen, yes, getting people housed is important and we're going to do that. But if we don't do all these other issues, they're going to end up being homeless a year from now or 2 years from now, and they're not going to have the community of support that they need going forward. So that's who we are in a nutshell, and that's what we want to be even after people long leave us, that they can still call us and say, hey, we're often there for a birth of a baby when someone leaves. They'll call us maybe to do a funeral, maybe to do their wedding. Years after they leave, they still have been grafted into our community. And there's no greater success to us than that when they call us. So thank you. I think probably I've hit time.
I just want to make a comment and a question.
Yeah.
Why does it sound like I'm on a microphone? That's weird. A few of us here have experienced and know about their annual Home Again Luncheon, which is their annual fund drive, which because of COVID this year they can't do in person, but they're doing virtually. And if you look at last Friday's what's happening at the chapel, you'll see an opportunity to get tickets. You can get free tickets for an hour-long video, or for a few bucks, you can buy a ticket, which will not only help local merchants, will get you a gift bag, but in that hour, we're going to learn more and we're going to see personal testimonies. Would you share a little bit of what we might expect in that hour?
Yeah, absolutely. So you'll hear from our many of our clients about their experience at Harvest House, kind of where they were, where they are today, some of what they experienced during the pandemic, and then some stories that are a little bit more in depth about maybe their history. You'll hear from all populations, youth, men and women addiction, families, so you really get an idea of the people we serve. You also get to hear from our program directors, so a little bit about what they do and what it looks like day in and day out, and you'll get to hear from my parents. And you might see my face. But it'll give you a really good overview and some in-depth insight into how everyone's support makes a difference every day in the people that we serve.
And when is that program?
It'll be next Tuesday, no, not this coming Tuesday, next Tuesday, February 23rd, and it airs at noon. So you can sign up for the free ticket, as Frank said, or buy a $50 ticket for a tote bag. You'll get a charcuterie box, so you'll have lunch and everything with it. We'll deliver it that morning to your house. And join us for an hour. We would love to have you.